Hey up! As you know, I've just taken a week and a half off over the Christmas period, and I've got to say, it's the first time in 5 years running this channel that I've actually been able to switch off and, to some extent, forget about the running of this channel. For a week and a half, it was fantastic. It's the closest thing that I've had to a rest in those 5 years. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy running this channel, but in the last few months of last year, I found myself progressively becoming more fatigued and more frustrated than I've ever been before. For the last 2 years, we've all been distracted by this pandemic. It's dominated every aspect of our day-to-day lives. And it became apparent sort of middle of the last year that whilst we were all sort of distracted by this worldwide phenomenon, governments worldwide had been working behind the scenes to make changes to our lives that will, let's face it, alter civilization in a way that no one in living memory has ever seen before. Well, certainly not in the Western world anyway. And come, a couple of days after New Year, I'll be honest, I didn't want to come back because I just didn't know what direction to take with this channel from here on. Because every aspect of what I do on this channel, and it's the same with other motorcycle channels and car-related channels, is in immediate danger of extinction. And I mean that is in immediate danger of extinction. In the latter half of last year, I announced that speed limiters were going to be fitted to new registered vehicles this year, along with telemetry systems that will track your every movement. I published a video in the latter half of last year explaining that the sale of new internal combustion engined cars was going to be banned from 2030 and motorcycles from 2035. In the latter half of last year, I produced a video explaining that our ability to personalise our vehicles was going to be curtailed. I even published a video right at the end of the year, exposing the UK government's open desire to wean us off personal transport altogether, telling us that going forward we needed to start relying on walking, pedal cycling or public service transport. And on each occasion, 80% of the comments related to people who understood what these changes are really going to mean for the average person on the street. But there are an alarming number of people that just don't get it. People that are oblivious to what is going on. They've got their heads stuck in the sand, or they're choosing just to look on the bright side of every restriction that's put in place, believing that somehow this is all progress and it's going to lead to a better world, a better life for the children, the grandchildren, a better life for them. And to be honest, I'm sick of the whole subject. I wished that I'd never reported on it in the first place. In fact, at the end of last year, I resolved I was going to steer away from this subject altogether because it's just not worth the hassle and the abuse. You can lead a thirsty horse to water, but you can't force it to drink it. So there's no point even trying. Now, between Christmas and the New Year, it became blatantly clear to me that there's no way this channel can continue in the direction that it's going in. And by that, I mean the general sort of motorcycle content. You need to adapt to change before that change takes place. You need to be ahead of the game if you're going to remain relevant on platforms like YouTube. And although even now I'm still not entirely sure what direction I'm going in, one thing is for certain, I cannot continue the way I have for the last 5 years. But over the Christmas period, despite the fact I wasn't sort of producing any new videos, those particular topics from the videos that I've made over the last few months still continue to get a high number of comments. Now, a fair few of those comments were from people who were, if you like, believers in human-induced climate change, People lecturing me that they're looking out for the children and the grandchildren because they want a better world for them going forward. So the car and the motorcycle has to go. It's a logical progression for mankind. It doesn't seem to matter to them that the lives of their children and grandchildren are going to be much harder than they are now because the cost of living will be sky high. It doesn't matter to them that to actually go out and see this wonderful new world, their children and grandchildren are going to have to plan and save to afford the expense of being able to travel any more than 10 or 20 miles away from the home because they're not going to have access to personal transport. And it doesn't matter to them that the job prospects for these youngsters are going to be severely limited for exactly the same reasons. Or maybe they've just not thought about it enough to realise that those are the true implications of what they are trying to sell to everyone. And then we have the other dominant comments in the comments section to those videos. The people that keep telling me, just hang on a minute, Stuart, they're only banning the sale of new cars and new motorcycles from 2030 and 2035. We can keep those vehicles on the road for 30 years. There's nothing to panic about. Personal, petrol-driven transport is going to be around for decades. You're just scaremongering. With some even suggesting that this is a good thing because the value of these vehicles is going to go through the roof. We're all going to be rich. Well, here's a reality check for you. 5 years from now, the trend is going to be that nobody wants those vehicles. It might even be sooner. I'm going to cautiously predict that the sale of those petrol vehicles is going to stop before those deadlines that have been quoted to us by the government. And here's why. Now, I don't know about you, but when an eminent government minister like Lord Frost resigns from a public and prestigious job in the UK government, as he did in the run-up to Christmas, and publicly cites that the reasons he is leaving is because he can no longer stand behind the direction that the government is moving in, referencing the way that the government has used the pandemic for political reasons and its ruinous green agenda. You know that your feelings are vindicated and you're not just being paranoid. And that there's probably more going on that you're not aware of. You see, these videos that I've made over the past few months in isolation seem bad enough, but they don't seem like the end of the world. They don't seem as serious in isolation. But if you think of this whole subject as sort of a jigsaw and you take all those pieces and slot them together, it's actually quite scary, and it prompted me to look even deeper into what's going on, and this is what I found. Now, we all think of the low emission zones in London as being fairly unique, where, you know, you have to pay a congestion charge to enter the city with a motor vehicle depending on its emission status. I know that there are one or two other large cities in the UK that are doing a similar thing, but I didn't realise just how widespread this is and how widespread it is going to become. You see, back in 2020, the UK government issued a directive to all city councils to start implementing similar strategies in their cities. And whilst I was researching, one in particular jumped out at me, the Oxford City Council's zero emissions zones. Now, this is a pilot scheme and it's coming into force this year. And it will replace their previous red zone. And what this means is that you will be charged a fee for entering the restricted zone using any petrol or diesel driven vehicle. There will be a minimum charge of £10 a day. It will be enforced with surveillance cameras, and you will have to pay the fee online. The fee for a heavy goods vehicle is £100 a day. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that as far as shops are concerned, in order to keep the supply that they require to stay in business, the price of their goods are going to have to be raised. And not only that, it's going to affect the level of supply, because they're going to want to be a lot more careful about how many deliveries they have a week. That is going to have a severe financial impact on anybody who relies on shops within that exclusion zone in order to buy their groceries or, normal staple products that they buy on a regular basis. But that's not the worst of it. Residents who own vehicles with internal combustion engines will not be exempt. The Oxford City Council states that they will be given a discount, but they're not divulging how much that will be. Let's say they half it, just to be able to park your car or perhaps your motorcycle on your drive. It's going to cost you about £150 a month. That's on top of your vehicle excise duty, which is going up this year, on top of your insurance, your petrol, and of course your maintenance costs. Now, the council doesn't use the word extortion, but that's exactly what it is, because they openly admit that the aim is to persuade local residents to get rid of their internal combustion engines and switch to electric. And of course, any city council or county council are going to love schemes like this, because it's huge amounts of money for nothing. Cambridge are about to do something very similar, as are Aberdeen, Bath, Birmingham, Bristol, Cardiff, Derby, Dundee, Edinburgh, Fareham, Glasgow, Leeds, London we already know about, Manchester, Newcastle, Portsmouth, Reading, Sheffield, Slough, Warrington and York. And that's just the list so far. This list will get bigger year on year going forward. And if successful, the boundaries of those clean air areas will be expanded. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that if you want to travel from one end of the country to another in a petrol vehicle, you're going to fall foul of some of these clean air areas on your travels. It's going to cost you. And the more widespread it becomes, the more frequently you're going to hit these charges, and the less likely it's going to be that you'll want to keep your petrol vehicle. And as those areas expand, if they follow a similar model to Oxford of charging residents, well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to afford to keep one internal combustion engine vehicle on my property. And of course the end result of this is that any internal combustion engine vehicle is going to be worthless. You won't be able to give them away. And I should mention that the Oxford's minimum charge is actually one of the more reasonable ones. Some of the others are charging £12.50 a day and above for the minimum charge. I think there's one or two charging £15 a day. This is obviously going to set a precedent which will snowball from here on in. Oh, and the Oxford City Council has just replaced some of its diesel vehicles with more diesel vehicles, citing electric vehicles as being too expensive and they can't afford to do it. Mark my words, if this experiment is successful, and we'll know within a few short months, every city council and county council in this country is going to jump on the bandwagon, because this is going to be an enormous earner. So as I say, I cautiously predict that within 5 years no one will want a petrol or diesel powered vehicle. Few people will even be able to afford to own them, depending on where they live. As the demand for fuel goes down, the cost will go up. As the demand for fuel goes down, there will be fewer service stations available to sell it to you, and the cost will go up even more. Electric vehicles are not going to get measurably cheaper. Owning an internal combustion engine vehicle is going to be so expensive that there will be no need for them to reduce the prices. It's considered taboo these days to refer to countries or regions as being third world. We have to refer to them as developing countries now. This green agenda that many governments are pursuing now has become a runaway train. A runaway train that will run out of track eventually, and the end result will be that countries like the UK, most of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, probably the United States and Canada will become third world countries with an unrealistic reliance on electric travel, crippling employment, industry and commerce. And the sad thing is, it will have no effect on the increase of CO2 in our atmosphere, because those developing countries are not following the same agenda as our countries. They will still use fossil fuels. The populations will still continue to grow. Their industries will continue to grow. And they will just pump out more and more CO2 as they continue to develop. 2 or 3 times a year, myself and my partner like to travel to York for a day out. We use the park and ride just outside York and take the bus into York Centre itself. It's quite an efficient service. I know about 3 years ago they replaced the whole fleet of buses with some new state-of-the-art bendy buses. Diesel powered, obviously, and I was a bit surprised when we arrived on New Year's Day to find that they've been replaced yet again, but this time with double deckers. I'm not sure how many of these buses there are, but there's literally one running about every 10 or 15 minutes from the car park 2 or 3 miles into the York Centre. We got on board and noticed immediately that the return fare had gone up by about 50 pence from £2.50 to £3. It was a very cold, wintry day, and to be honest, I was quite glad to get on the bus because I was feeling the cold a bit. And when it set off, it was immediately apparent that this new fleet, was actually electric. And as we travelled along, I watched this little information screen at the front of the bus boasting about their new electric buses and the hundreds of thousands of pounds that they each cost. But the other thing that I noticed is that on the journey it didn't get any warmer. It was like riding in a fridge. In fact, by the time we got to our destination, my feet and my hands were numb. As we got off, I thanked the driver, as I usually do, and mentioned to him about how cold it was, and he explained to me that despite the high cost of these vehicles and their high-tech design, they only had a limited range, and in order to get them through an entire day's service, it's not possible to provide any form of passenger heating. If they did, the batteries would only get them a quarter or halfway through the day. He smiled apologetically, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "That's progress for you." Once again, thank you so much for watching this and my other videos, and in doing so, helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I hope you found this video useful or enlightening. I know it's probably not the kind of thing that you want to hear early in a new year, but either way, I really would appreciate it if you would leave a like, and if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to this channel. I will of course be back next week, so until then, if you're riding, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.